you want to hear a real old man story? And this is later, because it's crazy. It's like YouTube didn't exist when I started. We had to physically mail, like, I was at the very end of mailing VHS tapes to like bookers and comedy clubs.
And did they even watch them?
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. And then it was like, there was a period of time it was like DVR, CDR, and it was like always the wrong format. If a booker did watch it, they'd be like, didn't work on my computer. You know, when I booked Comedy Central in 2009, and even then they said, send a DVD to this address. So even then, and now it's like, you know, it's so much easier to be ignored now. You can just send a link or whatever. And even for a while, YouTube was like 10-second clips. All that stuff has changed so crazily. But yeah, when I realized I have sent VHS tapes out to seek employment in comedy, I'm like, yeah, I have been doing it a while.
Dude, Kermit said, he told the story about Hedberg, like getting in a van and driving across the country and shit, and like just going to clubs and like doing the mic and then trying to get booked as an MC and shit. And it's all that stuff was on the phone, like phone books and shit. Like I can't imagine the stuff we have right now with Facebook groups is still pretty shitty. You know, like it's not organized in any way. Like there are some people that have been proactive about like sort of organizing these things, but it seems like with comedy, like everybody goes through that cycle of, you know, starting and then starting to book shows and do that stuff. And like once that stuff doesn't apply to you anymore, you don't care about it at all. So unless you catch people that are like really motivated early to make this open source thing better, it's not going to be improved.
There would be people who are like, oh, so-and-so, they have a whole folder of like all these contacts for all these clubs across the country. And then you'd work with them someday and they're like, you want to look at my, you want to look at my, it was like this gold information. Like, you ever watch Glenn Glary? It's like, I've got the leads.
And that was like, but was that for real how you started getting traction and stuff, or was
It's still how I get traction.
Yeah.
It's exchanging of information. Who books that? You know, sometimes you can use their name, sometimes you can't, that kind of stuff. It's kind of still, you know, it's a numbers game. No one, a club I have never worked before, if they get an email, not from my manager, because I don't have one, but just from me that's like, I'd like to work there, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I still send them sometimes, but it's like, it's not, you know, I'm not on their radar, and that's fine. I probably shouldn't be, but but if it's so-and-so said I should book you, that's still different. That's
for sure. It's still like the gold standard of
for sure
just references and shit.
And other bookers, like I'll work a club that's like, I'm going to call this club on your behalf. That's what happened in Vegas. Is I worked for Brad Garrett's comedy club. That manager was like, I'm going to call across the street and get you in at the Laugh Factory. I'm like, great.
That's so rad, dude.
Because I've emailed that guy 100 times and it never, you know what I mean? It takes something different, you know?
Well, it's a very strange industry too, where like the only objective thing that we have probably is like numbers and like logos and brands, right? Yeah. So it's like this special got this many views. And I guess YouTube's helpful in that way to like sort of like quantify some of this shit. But somebody who's been doing it just as long as you could make the argument, I've been doing it for this many years or whatever, and not know what they're doing. It's the same thing that you talked about at the beginning, is you can get in just as easily at the beginning as anybody else. There's no barrier to entry, which then leads to massive amounts of riffraff. And like, I can't imagine on the Strip, across the Strip, how much bad comedy there is. Like,
well, I don't know. The Vegas, that's a very weird scene. Not like the scene of people who work at the big rooms in the casinos, but it's a very weird place to do comedy. One, it's just to work and like to start your comedy career in the shadow of all these giant showrooms, but you're at like some
side room.
Yeah, which is fine. We do that here too, but it's also a pretty wild scene of like, especially being from the Seattle area, where you just watch comedy that's like, I think that person might be arrested. But yeah, I mean, actually, to circle that back a little bit about when I delivered groceries, that's actually because in comedy, we're all trying to solve this puzzle, and it's different for everyone, and one person's path is not your path, or you look at someone successful and you're like, how'd you do it? And it's like, we're all asking, we're asking lottery winners how they won.
Yeah.
And they go, I don't know, I picked 5, 12, 17, 6, and 9, and I won. And we're like, that's what I'm going to do. It's not going to work. It's like, it's all different. And there's always something you should be doing, or at least we feel that I got to write a new joke. I got to email this person. I have this to do. You're never done. You're never clocking out. And I really loved deliver. I didn't want to do it as a career, but delivering groceries was so black and white and simple. I got a ding on my phone. I drove to a Walmart. They loaded up my car. I went to their house. I hit a thing on my app. It was so, I'm done. It had a beginning. It had an end.
It's so amazing. I had you come on to talk about like 20 years worth of experience in comedy, and you're promoting like, have you considered a day job? Because it's so much easier.
I mean, look, the whole goal is to not have a day job.
Yeah.
But as soon as you don't have one, you're like, fuck, that's a pretty good. Anyone who like uses the word hobbyist, I'm like, good for you. That's exactly what this should be for everyone.
Yeah.
And instead, we're all like, we have these big goals and dreams, and that's great, and some of mine have come true, and some of my goals have been accomplished. But it is, like I said, it's not like, oh, I like this better than performing comedy, but just the simplicity of.
I was having that conversation this week with somebody where it's just like, can you imagine how simple life would be if I just did my day job and then, like, I don't know, went out on a date, or like, it's the amount of sacrifice that you make to do this thing. It's so much, but it's also extremely rewarding, and it's
incredibly rewarding and gratifying. At the same time, their lows are low, but it's like, I don't know. I'll sort of quote myself from a book that hasn't come out, but a thing I said in 2020 was, stand-up comedy is 200 nights of joy that still somehow ends up being a bad year. Because it's like, the shows are so fun, and that's a thought I had in that moment of a bad moment, but there is this like the great joy, and there's this great, but it's hard, you can't maintain that. I don't get that high anymore because I do so many shows. I don't get that high or that low, but it's like, you can't, the feeling you have from like a great comedy show, there has to be a crash after it, just like a drug.
Yeah. It's
like, there's a price to be paid to feel that good. There is a price to pay. It's like the natural order of life is off in our brain when we get to go. Whatever day job you have, I bet they don't fucking clap when you show up.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's not right. That's a new concept in the biology and evolution of the human brain, to be like, I'm here. Thank you so much. So I'm not like super melancholy about it. I'm not a person who thinks we're all these sad clowns. I think there's just as many sad receptionists as there are sad comedians. Mm-hmm. But I do think there is a cost to any. Just like having children is like one of the most intense, incredible experiences of my life. There is a cost to that. There is a cost to, I wanted to travel the world doing comedy, and I do that. And there is a cost to that too. That's just the natural order of things. But one of the thing when I came here to talk about Spark Delivery and Walmart Grocery. One of the things that was very interesting to me is I walk around with a low level of guilt always, because stand-up comedy, although it brings joy to the world, hopefully on a good night, it feels very selfish, and it is very selfish, because it's like, I miss a lot of my kids' activities. I miss a lot of time. I miss a lot of time with my wife, or there's a lot of sacrifice. My wife has to be in charge of my children when I'm gone by herself. That it's just, there's like this low level of like, I'm a good father. I'd be a better father if I was home more.
For sure.
That's just the reality.